So I wanted to talk tonight about the Putting Students First Act, give you some information that you may not have, and then maybe at the end give you a little call to action that we're trying to organize. So I'll tell you a little story first about my firstborn, who's actually going to be graduating from grade 12 this year. So like 1995 he was born, and I remember holding him for the first time, and when he grabbed my finger just kind of like this, that I said to myself, I don't think I said it out loud, I think I said it to myself, you know, I want to keep him safe, and that was my goal as a parent. 4 years later, when we had our second child, I realized that I couldn't actually keep him safe. I could influence whether he was safe, but so when my second child was born and I held his hand just like that, I thought, okay, safety is outside my control. He'd already started, I think, junior kindergarten, and there were times when he wasn't holding onto my legs. So, so for my second child, I thought, okay, I want to make sure he's happy. Can anybody guess how that's working out? He's in grade 8 right now. Not as well as I'd hoped it would work out. And 4 years later, because every 4 years we had a child, until our third, my daughter was born. And safety wasn't working, happiness wasn't working. I mean, there were times, but it just didn't seem to continue. And what I really thought when my daughter was born was, I really hope my kids find their passion in life. And you know, if I can help them do that, then I've done a good job as a parent. And I also wanted to just talk briefly about the history of PTA, because I don't know if we call ourselves school councils, some people say parent councils, some people still say PTAs, but the PTA in the States started in 1897. So we are, I think as a collective, we could say we're 115 years old. Is my math right? It was started by two women, a teacher and a mother. Alice Burney was a mother, and the teacher was Phoebe Hurst. And I thought it was kind of cool to talk about that, because there's the earliest example I could find of a parent and a teacher working to impact change. And it wasn't called the PTA back then, it was actually called the National Congress of Mothers. I probably wouldn't be speaking at that time, but they were able to, in a time when, first of all, women weren't allowed to vote back then, in 1897. So they organized. They got quickly over 2,000 people supporting them with no internet. And I know we talked earlier about how we communicate with our schools. I don't know how they did that. I don't know how to, this is actually a copy of a postage stamp from the US mail. I don't know how they got things around, but I guess it was by mail. They got their message out, or by going and talking to people, which is never a bad idea. For me, my involvement with school council started with a decision. My oldest son was in grade 5, and it happened very quickly. I was in the schoolyard talking to a friend of mine who had moved from the West End, who's a grade 5-6 teacher, and he's won, you know, Teacher of the Year awards in his school for years. Great guy, and I looked at him, I thought he'd be a great teacher. Not to mention that at MBAC it was all female, and some of the teachers had asked me if I knew any guys who could work there as well. So I asked him in the schoolyard, he has a son, I said, how would you like to come and apply? Because we've got a spot open for a junior grade teacher, and you'd be great at it. And he looked at me, didn't miss a beat, he said, are you nuts? And I was like, no, I'm just asking, you know, do you want to come and work at the school your son's going to be going to in a few years? He said, do you know what reputation your parents have? And I didn't, because I hadn't really been involved in the school. I said, no. He said, the parents at this school are viewed as bullies, they're disrespectful to teachers, and you're going to have a really tough time getting a good teacher in this school. And here I am thinking, okay, so if we can't get a good teacher, yeah, how are we going to attract good teachers who are going to help our kids to reach their potential? So I think the next month I was at my first school council meeting, and then my second school council meeting I was chair. So, and I've been doing it now for 6 years. You're going to wonder when I'm going to get to Bill 115, because now there's apples on the screen. But apples, yeah, exactly. Well, I was having a meeting with some teachers from another school and trying to explain Bill 115. So I brought a bag of apples. And I took 5 apples out of the bag, and one of the teachers in the summer, she has an apple farm in Quebec. So I gave her 5 apples from the bag, and I said, have an apple, Lynn. And she looked at the apples, and she took one. And then I passed her the bag and I said, is there a better apple in the bag? And she's a very fast apple farmer. She looked, she said, that one's better. And she goes, can I have it? I said, no, you can't have it. She said, that's not fair. I said, yeah, but I gave you 5 to pick from. You chose, you know, take what you got. And then I said to the teacher sitting beside her, hey, would you like that apple out of the bag? So she got that apple and picked it out. The reason I bring that up is one of the things that's hidden and actually isn't even mentioned in Bill 115 that's going to hit our schools on January 1st is a new practice for hiring. Has anybody heard of it yet? Okay, our trustee has, that's good. So starting on January 1st, our teacher pool, when you get applications for teachers, the principal is only going to be allowed to interview the 5 most senior teachers who apply. Which, when you look across North America, is the exact opposite of what every school board across North America is trying to do right now with contracts. That's actually going into contracts on January 1st. And the cool thing is, it's not even in the bill. So how is that ending up in contracts is one of the questions I've been asked. And has anybody heard of a Memorandum of Understanding? Okay. All right. We'll talk a little bit about that and how that got in there. But starting on January 1st, this is what the hiring is going to look like. Seniority comes before performance. This is going to impact your kids' education starting next year. The first time you have a teacher leave. And that scares me. And I was thinking as I came here today, it's November 1st, I was thinking we should have done this last night because this is scary stuff. It is. And nobody's heard about it. Everybody I go and talk to, nobody's heard this because it's hidden. I call it the secret deal. This is, I call him Mr. Adam Beck now because his first name's Adam. And he's our integrated arts teacher. We were fortunate enough to hire him, I think 2 years ago, because we wouldn't be able to hire him in January. He's fairly fresh out of school, fabulous music teacher, gets involved in everything in the school. He's got the kids doing things that just blow me away every time I see him working with the kids. And he's really brought an integrated arts focus to our school. And he would not get a job with us. The other interesting thing is that, and you may not be aware of this, at the elementary school level, to be qualified to teach music and art, you don't actually have to have a background. It's only when you get to high school that you have to have a specialist in those subjects. So those 5 most senior teachers may not even have a background in music. They may not have a background in art. They may not be able to carry a tune. The slide I was going to put up here was, you know, a music room filled with kids with the piano there and the iPod sitting on top. This is happening. It's going into effect January 1st. One of the questions you might have is, how did we get there? How did this end up being in contracts when we thought it was about a wage freeze? Right? So before I talk about how this happened, let me just highlight how the process is supposed to work, because I find as I talk to parents and school councils, a lot of people don't understand how this works, because we've got a government and they're saying one thing, and then you've got a school board, you've got teachers, and you've got unions. So how does it all fit together? Now, the government talks about something called a provincial discussion table. If you've heard that, it sounds like it's a very important part of the process. It's something they introduced within the last 8 years, and all it is sitting down at a table and the government saying, here's what we need you to come in at in terms of a budget. And that's what a provincial discussion table does. It starts that up. It's a voluntary process. People who want to show up, show up. But the government's made that sound in the last few months like this is kind of where negotiations happen, and it's not. The way the system works is that teachers are hired by school boards. Okay, they're not hired by the government. The contracts are negotiated between a school board and a union. Okay? Once the union is satisfied that their membership would be happy with that, they then talk to the teachers and say, look, this is the deal we've got. Does it make sense? And the teachers do what they call ratifying that contract. Okay? So the government has a fiscal target that they need to meet, and they do share that with school boards, and the school boards do have, I think, a legal obligation to hit those budgets. But they're not part of the negotiating. Okay? So the people who are actually involved with teaching the kids are, but what happened this time was the government gave some mandates, people left the discussion table, and the government decided to negotiate with one union in the province of Ontario. And they picked OECTA, which is the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association. And they sat down with OECTA and they said, look, why don't we make a deal? Now, recognizing the government is a rookie in this process, they haven't been involved in teacher contract negotiations. So I'm sure Kevin O'Dwyer, I believe, is the head of OECTA, was probably sitting there, on his hands like, this is a present. I've got an unexperienced negotiator coming to the table with me. So the government is now negotiating with the union, and the government says, okay, we want a wage freeze. And by the way, every teacher I've talked to expected a wage freeze. The OSSTF, which is the Secondary School Teachers Federation, went to the table proposing a wage freeze, and the government said, no, we're not happy with that. Because in year, I think, 3 and 4, they proposed cost of living increases. So wage freeze was not the big issue. The government wanted more, so they were looking at sick pay as a way to do that. OECTA decided to trade some things. So they traded seniority-based hiring. Okay? They got that for giving up some sick pay, which, by the way, we are going to pay as members of the public. Once this is done, we're going to pay to take that back, because every school board in North America is paying money to trade that back from the union. So we're getting a short-term gain, but we gave them a great gift because we're going to want that back. Actually, I want it back today. The things in the bill that really scare me, so I talked about what's going to happen to education, but how the government has used their power to stifle people talking about this. So they've certainly stopped teachers from talking about it. They've actually put in the bill that unions aren't even allowed to threaten to strike or do work to rule. So they've taken that voice away. With the Ontario Labour Board, the Ontario Labour Board isn't allowed to look at the legislation to find if it fits with the Labour Board standards. They're not allowed to look at it and see if it fits with the Human Rights Code. And this stuff is in Bill 115. Okay? The Ontario courts aren't allowed to challenge the bill, which is why people are going to the Supreme Court. And school boards and trustees were right out of the loop on what happened. So they're just finding out as we are, right? As they investigate and hear more. So they did a job on taking people's voices away. And as a school council chair, I realized that you can't take my voice away. I'm a parent. I decided to look after my kids' education the day they were born. So by taking the rights of negotiating away, they took the people who would have protected our kids' rights, because just so you know, the reason the union did not go to the teachers to have this Memorandum of Understanding ratified was because teachers would not have ratified it. It's not only bad for our kids, it's bad for our teachers. Okay? A recent study in the States that was just published in the summer, over 1,000 teachers surveyed about whether they felt seniority-based hiring should be part of their contracts. 78% of teachers said it shouldn't be, who had more than 20 years experience. When you cut that down to people who had less than 5 years, it was like 91%. And one of the reasons is that if you're a teacher and you're teaching after a teacher who's not so good, you've got a really hard year ahead of you, right? So taking away the democratic rights and taking the people away from the table who actually protect our children. So you're now negotiating just with the union. And I'll throw one more thing about the union in. Why would OECTA stay at the table? The Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association. I'll give you one reason that I've heard, and it kind of rings true with me, is that we talked about whether school boards should combine, and we should have not a Catholic and a public school board. That may or may not happen, but the government controls that. If that happens in some negotiation, OECTA disappears. No Catholic board, no union for Catholic teachers. Maybe self-preservation, but there was a reason for them to be at the table, and they definitely got something out of it. They got something we're going to want to take back, and we're going to have to pay money for. So what do you do? Well, first of all, it's kind of like a time bomb. It's ticking. When I put this slide together, there was still a legislature sitting, and my hope was that we could petition them and have them repeal the bill. Because on December 31st, January 1st, these things go into contracts. We're prorogued right now, but what we want to do is when the government is sitting back in Parliament, we want them to repeal the bill, whatever day that happens. And here's how we're going to do that, because I believe we can. First thing is communication. Communication channels have been destroyed with this bill. As school councils, we can communicate. And one of the reasons I'm videotaping tonight is because we can communicate through video, we can communicate through social media, but we want to get the message out to school councils about what's happening. Because I think the look on people's faces that I see here will be similar when other people find out what's happening with seniority-based hiring and how we ended up at that. We want to petition the government, and we want to petition every member of Parliament in their local riding from all the schools in that riding, so that they're showing up with 10,000 petitions signed the day the legislature opens back up. Our goal is to get over 1 million signed petitions. So we start with communications, we work with school councils, and we petition where we get the MPPs to present petitions in Parliament, and we call for a vote. What we're asking for in the petition is that there is a vote on repealing Bill 115. And I believe with the power of the parents and the teachers and school boards and administrators, I know you guys are kind of still silenced, but with the power of parents and teachers, I believe we can get this done. And I believe that it's important enough for us to give kids hope for their future, right? And there's a movie that actually came out just recently. It's called Education is Hope. And it's about, it's a documentary done in Kenya about education. And we talked about K-12 strategy. Education has the ability to transform lives and give hope to people who may not have it. And I think it's a cause worth fighting for. I think that it gives you hope for the future. I think it gives you hope that you can become better. And as a parent, I think it gives me hope that I can leave a better world than maybe what I came into. And I have to tell you right now, it doesn't feel like that. You know, I don't know who if anybody read Boom, Bust, Echo. Anybody remember that book? Here's what the next book's going to be. Boom, Bust, Echo, Lost Generation. Right? Saw it in Japan, starting to see it in Europe. They're talking about it in the States. Education is our way out of that cycle. So, education is hope. Our group that we've put together, which blows me away that the government has done such a great marketing job but left this one wide open, we have the website puttingstudentsfirst.org. So they have the Putting Students First Act. Our group is going to be called puttingstudentsfirst.org. Within the next 10 to 14 days, we'll have a website up, we'll have petitions, we'll have video, we'll have education, we'll have resources so that you can see where these things come from. And I encourage people to make their own judgments on it. I'm giving you one opinion. I've researched this stuff for many hours. I've talked to many people at different levels of government to find out what happened. You may not have the time to do that, but challenge any idea you see. That's what education's about. I'm presenting kind of a quick overview in 20 minutes of something, as I said earlier, I haven't done in less than 40, so I'm sure I'm missing lots of stuff, but I do hope that with Sheila's award maybe as the start, that we can start this communication to our councils and that we can use our power as parents to become a voice for teachers and to become a voice for our students. So that's my 20-minute spiel. Anybody who'd like to stay longer, I can talk for 40, 400, or 4,000 minutes. I know.
We do have caretakers.
Yes. But thank you. I know I've gone a couple of minutes over time, but thank you very much.